So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Slade Besson, Director of Telecommunications and Networking at Nicholls State University.
And I'm Jeff Dhaenens, team leader for Volkswagen Group of America.
We're so excited to be here with you today discussing that topic that no one ever wants to use, disaster recovery. Before we get kicked off, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this business?
Sure. I always think of Volkswagen as my third career. So I've been at Volkswagen for well more than a decade now in network and telecom. Before that, I worked for a telecommunications carrier, selling the kind of connectivity I use here at Volkswagen, SIP services throughout the United States. And before that, I worked at the University of Michigan. I started my career fixing hospital equipment. And by the time I left, I was managing a 5,000 call a day inbound contact center with the hospital operators. This would be, I'm familiar with Y2K and moving your entire hospital just in case all the power shuts off. So that's a little bit about me.
Great.
How about you, Slade?
I'm a little different. I graduated from Nichols. I was a student worker for 4 years in our IT department doing PC repairs and some basic networking. Once I graduated, they hired me on full time. I was doing when I first started full time. I was continuing doing a little bit of PC repair, but starting to concentrate more and more into networking. And then just after graduation, we had a phone project to getting kicked off. So we replaced our entire fiber cable plant, which is about 30,000 feet of fiber. And we moved from our NEC phone system, analog phone system, to our then Nortel Option 81C phone system. So they kind of got me to head up that project, and that's kind of how I got in the telecom world on top of the networking world. So that was my kind of kickoff for that. From then on, I took over, eventually becoming director over networking and telecom on campus, and that's kind of how I got to have both of my feet on both sides of the house on campus. So it's been an interesting journey, but this has been my only place I've been working. I've been here for quite some time now. I'm the old guy here on campus, so pretty interesting having that perspective around all these college kids.
Well, being around college kids helps keep you young too. So
No
that's
doubt
good.
about that, but they kind of make you feel old at times. So, Jeff, we're here today to talk about disaster recovery. Do you have any insights on the importance of disaster recovery, especially in a large business like you? Obviously, that's something you certainly have to consider throughout.
Certainly, and I take it back to before we had COVID. Um, in my career back during Y2K, didn't know if the power was going to stay on, and where would we actually run hospital operations because the operators were in a different part of the building. Um, we literally moved all of our hospital operators into the basement of the hospital just for that New Year's Eve night because the hospital's on generators. And when I fast forward to Volkswagen, when I first got here, we actually paid for a disaster recovery site. So a facility within 20 miles of where we're at, where literally was cubes with PCs and some kind of PRIs in it, and we were spending a fortune for it. And I kind of challenge folks, hey, have you ever tried using it? I mean, we paid for it. Do you ever try to use it? And so we actually did a journey over there to look at it. And gosh, you're dealing with everything from old PCs that were like on Windows 95 or running in Vista. That wouldn't support, the Avaya 1X clients on them. And so it was just very much an eye opener. And for us, one of the things we like to say is the best opportunity, or anybody's got a plan till the Mike Tyson you get punched in the face. Um, wouldn't it be easier to actually do a disaster plan, actually do a failover, and make sure it works instead of having to do it at the moment that it happens? So that's why it's important for us. We do them twice a year.
Yeah, similar scenario with us too. Of course, our university tends not like to spend money. We're a state institution, so our funds are absolutely limited. So selling our university on disaster recovery has been a challenge throughout the years. We had several little disasters here and there that slowly inched our way to a good disaster recovery plan. We had a sprinkler head bust in our auditorium just on side of our data center, and we're in South Louisiana, so our data center has a subfloor, which is not a good idea in South Louisiana because we do get a lot of rain. So all that water from that sprinkler actually found the low spot in our building, which is our subfloor in our data center, and it flooded it. And our data center went that hard down because we have power and all running through that floor. So that was an interesting scenario, which started our small increment of a disaster recovery plan where we actually got um, all our subfloor components moved up above the flood mark. We then started looking at, backup generators and all those things like that to get those physical things in our disaster recovery plan. But it's always been a challenge for us to get the funding and the justification until something happens. That tends to be when we actually get a little bit movement on that. So we kind of been inching our way to DR. I think at this point in time, they actually really, really understand why we need DR, and we'll kind of start getting into more of that as we go. One common thing that we kind of all shared throughout was the COVID event. So that was kind of disaster area that kind of everybody shared a part of. What was kind of your plan going into that?
Well, and you mentioned the financial part of that, and that's how we were actually able to be successful prior to COVID. I mentioned the offsite place that we went to, and so we had an annual fee that we were paying to this place, and the contract was up. So when you looked at what was the cost of the facility, plus having to put in trunks and guarantee, you paid to have your spot reserved, and combine that with, as you're doing PC refreshes throughout the organization, back in the day we all had towers and desktop units, and when Volkswagen started transitioning to laptops, used to be a reward to work from home for the high performers. And what we started doing is saying, hey, we can make a business case to say, you don't need the disaster recovery facility. What you need is people with laptops. People with laptops that they're bringing to work and they're taking home at night, or they're going to be the people that are working from home. We're able to use that budgeting argument to say, instead of paying for real estate over here, transition to some PCs on your everyday life. And they work. That's what you're going to use every single day. And then you have VPN clients that are working throughout the organization. That made great sense. It actually created a better argument for us to say, no one has to get in a car. You literally just have to get up in the morning and connect. So that was the big cost saving piece for us prior to COVID. We had already gotten rid of a disaster recovery site and became with our option for a disaster was work from home. Conclusive also, we got rid of telephones. Everyone's on their wire headsets or talking through their PCs or on different things, but conference rooms are the only things that we have phones besides some hoteling phones, safety, security.
Well, we were certainly in a different perspective back then. Prior to COVID, of course, our CS1000 that we installed way back in 2001 was very old. And I was constantly pitching to go to our newer phone system with all the bells and whistles to be able to work remote, be able to do things from the cloud, to be able to be a mobile campus where we don't have to be tied to our desk phone. Our people love desk phones. We're still in that kind of quasi area. We got a lot of old professors that if they don't have a desk phone, I'm not going to make a call. That's just the way they are. And you're not going to change them because they have a PhD. And that means something. So I kept pitching that for probably 3 or 4 years, and I kept getting knocked down. Oh, we don't have any needs to work remote. We're an on-site campus only. We have no needs for all the bells and whistles. We don't need to do mobile clients. We don't need any of that because you should be at your desk answering your phone all the time. That's the way our rules were. Well, guess what? COVID. expose that. So we had no remote access plan when COVID hit. So we did a lot of scrambling, and thankfully, with the user group, I knew about all the new bells and whistles of all the different phone systems on campus, and I reached out to our reps, and they were thankfully happy enough to give us 50 user licenses for the ACO, and we use that for our main critical business units, our admissions office, our controller's office, all the things, the offices that we need to make this university run in that COVID, during that COVID time when we couldn't come to campus. That kind of pretty much saved us. And, soon after we got back on campus, what's the first question our president asked? Why didn't we have a remote work plan? I'm sitting there. I've been preaching it for years now. What the heck? So, needless to
Yes.
say, no good disaster comes with some rewards. So, from then on, I got funding for that. And we did move over to ACO, which thankfully, during our install of ACO, we actually got a direct hit by Hurricane Ida. And we then had a way to still communicate even though through that hurricane. So, our campus was down 15 days without power. Our entire community was out of power for 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the area you were. We had students and faculty and staff scattered all over the southern U.S. We still needed to operate businesses. We turned into a National Guard site. We turned into a regional hub for people to come on campus because we were one of the very few places that had internet. We was one of the very few places that had phone. We had to run payrolls because all these people are paying for hotel rooms and everything they need to while they are on during the evacuation. So we had to run payrolls. Well, guess what? All our payroll people were all scattered throughout remotely. Thankfully, we had ACO in place, and we were able to do 4-digit dialing from on campus to those people in remote and kind of continue business as usual during that times. We also set up a little mini, I guess, call center, if you will, for people to come in. They can use internet, and the public can come in, use internet. They can use phones to start doing their insurance claims and all those things that happened during a disaster during that. And we were all able to do that because of that DR plan that we thankfully just got due to COVID. Because prior to COVID, we had to share cell phone numbers. Some people didn't want to give their personal cells to their the bosses and whatnot. You always have those dynamics. Oh, I forgot to get this person's cell number, but we all know each other's 4-digit extensions, so it made that transition so much easier. Personally, something to think about for disaster, which, I've been through several hurricanes, but during hurricanes, you have very, very spotty cell service if you even have cell service at all. You have very spotty data internet service if you have it at all. And we turn into a cash only society during those weeks of no power and no internet. So a lot of people don't think about that when they do disasters and they don't have the cash available. So always remember to keep a little bit of cash because you're running on generators, you're doing all that, you need gas. If you're trying to move around the disaster area, you burn gas in your car. Gas lines are usually, I don't know, 100, 200 cars deep. You have to have cash to pay for the debt gas and all those things. That's something that kind of catches a lot of people by surprise because we're so used to that cashless society. Swipe your card, use Apple Pay, or what have you. So that's a little personal tidbit of DR on that note. So,
I
so
did have I did have two things that I wanted to mention about COVID that was a good lessons learned. Um, During the beginning of COVID, of course, cars aren't going to dealerships. They're not buying parts, but we still have parts people. Yet there were a lot of people that needed deferment on their car loans. And VCI, Volkswagen Credit, who holds that financial obligation, they literally couldn't keep up with their phone calls. So first, their carrier was going to tell them would take 30 business days to upgrade the amount of concurrent calls that their SIP trunks could take. So, one, not all carriers are the same. Do your homework before selecting a SIP carrier. You want one that can actually do simple keystrokes and get things changed. But two, the Avaya platform for us worked wonderfully in the fact that we were able to set up an IP trunk between Volkswagen Credit and us, and our parts agents started taking calls for customers calling in English who knew their account number. And then we could easily just transfer into their system and at least get them into their CRM and, hey, John Smith has just called. He has an A4. He's looking to do this. So perfect. That was a great success story. And we found a disparity between our IP agent licenses and our elite agent licenses. And Avaya spun up for 90 days for us just to get that match correct. And we were able to take all the calls that we could for VCI. So Avaya stepped up and helped us on the agent side with licensing. And two, not all SIP carriers are exactly the same.
Which is definitely a point you need to drive home for sure is, you know, saying one thing, saying, all right, and we could cover these disasters. A whole other thing, making sure that the people you're relying on can actually do the DR as well. So
Yep.
having all parties involved when you're doing your disaster planning for sure is very, very key.
Yeah, and for us it was okay. What are we going to do with all the phone agents? Like, we're not going to do anything. We're going to treat it like it's a holiday. Like, just you're going to work from home. You're going to log in. I do know the security wasn't used to 5,000 people on the VPN, so they had to make some adjustments, as well as we beefed up our internet circuit. But for us, our twice annual failover of the phone systems from Auburn Hills to our DR center in the plant in Chattanooga worked wonderfully. It was a perfect example of how it can work.
So, kind of that being said, how did you sell your business case to your higher ups to actually fund a lot of these things? And what were some of the key points that you expressed to your higher ups to actually realize that DR is actually really, really important?
Well, it's a couple of things. One, we were able to first we did the cost savings that helped us in getting rid of a physical offsite presence. We had actually had an outage on a July 4th weekend years prior that we had invested into an enterprise survivability server as well. So where do you put that? We chose to put it in the other data center in Chattanooga. And then from that point, we would that's when we started our twice annual failover testing to prove that it would work. So it wouldn't be a disaster every time we had a disaster. We talked to, and how we were able to get funding for it was talk about our July 4th weekend problem that we had. What did that cost to our reputation? How much overtime did you hit to people who had to now come into the office and try to do some different things? How hard and difficult it was to work with carriers during that time. There's a cost to your reputation. There is a cost to your brand. There's a cost to the payroll pieces. And adding all that together is, hey, what's the capital investment to not have to deal with this in the future? And there's some expenses, of course, as well. Proof is in the pudding. Every time that we do a failover test, we try to get another application over into our DR site, whether it's callback assistance, whether it's our workforce optimization tools working from both sites. We're always trying to move that needle. But by producing the results every time we do it, here's what we did right, here's what we learned, here's what we had missed. We at least continue to build credibility with the folks that are writing those checks and allowing our budget to maintain. They're, of course, looking for cheaper ways to do it, but
yes, getting them sold and getting them to see actually the proof, like you said, the proof in the pudding of a good DR plan, that really weighs in a lot for their decision. It shows them that, hey, we're just not blowing smoke. We're actually trying to make this work really well. Yeah, we're in a similar scenario, of course, lately we had to rely on regulatory requirements, but before, like every disaster always has, all right, this is how we get away from being so down for so long during those disasters. And, hurricanes are a common thing over here. We had one last year, we had one in 2021, we had one in 2017, 2018 that we had to evacuate. So it's pretty much every 3-4 years, we're bound to get a hurricane or at least have to evacuate for a hurricane. And those different scenarios is what kind of helps provide us to do a lot of our DR sites. But they also have all the other things we have to worry about as IT professionals. And one of the main drivers for us justifying the cost is, hey, what happens when the network's down? you don't do anything. You're doing no calling, you're doing no internet. Your students are there, they can't work because everything's online now. Your teachers can't teach because everything's online now. Our business units, all they're doing is sitting, waiting for the internet to come back on. So all of that lost revenue is due to us not having a backup solution in place. So that's really helped us justify that. Just recently, we started getting more threats, if you will, from the federal government about our GLBA requirements and GLBA uh, solutions to help us get more compliant with them so we can accept federal financial aid. So GLBA is Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. And that basically says us universities have to have all the security, data security as pretty much as a bank does. And that's been a really interesting challenge for us the past couple of years, trying to get that compliant because, as a state school, we kind of get relaxed in what we do and security. We got to make things work because we have such a small staff, and security is kind of an afterthought. Well, that particular act is starting to put that as our primary goal. So that GLBA has really helped us solidify more of our DR plan, and when it comes to our data backups and all those different things, those security standpoint things that are really important and that we need to follow. So that's another way that we have been able to justify our DR plan. So like you said, we do test our disaster plans because there's always a hurricane, there's always some kind of event here. That's just the kind of the way of life here. So we do have to show them the proofs in the pudding, and for those events, that's where we actually show it. So um, looking more down the line, uh, what's some of the tips you would suggest in building your DR plan, and kind of for somebody that may not be as seasoned as we are, Jeff, and I'm not saying we're old, I'm just saying we're seasoned. What's some of the tips of somebody kind of getting started, what they should look at, think about, and those kind of things?
Well, for us, we try to look at it as envision if what a normal day looks like, and if we aren't going to have an over normal day, how will that processing happen? And so for us, it is creating the communication plan. It is coming up with tell me, business leader, what does perfect look like for you? What would that look like? What would you be willing to fund or tolerate if I couldn't get your call to you in that quick? It's tough because voice has become the utility that we barely pay attention to. We expect it. You pick up the phone, you always hear dial tone. It's a utility. The lights are always on. Well, when the lights aren't on and the dial tone isn't there, what's your next method of communication? Is it chat? Is it email? Well, if I don't have any network, there's no email, there's no chat. The first thing I would literally do is sit down with the business leaders who know what does a sunny day look like, what normal looks like, and if by chance there's no network or there's no power, what is your plan? What do you expect our customers to receive at the end? And by setting what's perfect look like in a disaster recovery situation, we can then go back with and craft a plan. We could do that direct with VI. We could work with other business partners as well and come up with a solution for here's must-haves, here's what you got to have, and here's how I can do that. We've been fortunate enough to build some credibility around cost savings for DR, cost savings for SIP, that we have some credibility with the business units as well. And from that, it's really executing the plan and sharing the communication, sharing the details. Here's when I'm going to test this. This is how I expect to look like. And even if the test is bad and doesn't work, you share it. Here's what I learned from what we just did. You get to a point where, and I really think COVID's taught us a huge lesson. What was dial tone like before? And did your cell phone coverage just become good enough? Each company's different. Is the voice on a cell service good enough? Or does it have to be absolutely pristine clear? Only your business units can tell you that. So for us, it's building the plan. It's working with the internal business users, and it's actually executing.
Yeah, and we're very similar in that as well. One thing I will say is each disaster exposes different things. So you always have to be willing to adapt and look at more scenarios as you go through. We certainly wouldn't want to try to figure out every possible scenario when you first start. It'd be more of trying to, all right, this is our most common thing for us as hurricanes. We know that's going to happen. It will absolutely happen one day. So we have to build our DR for that. From there, we also have to start considering as a university, cybersecurity attacks, um, shooter on campus, all those different things that may or may not impact your IT environment, your cell service, or what have you. But you have to start considering those. If you have a shooter on campus, guess what? Everybody calls your campus and see what's going on. So that call volume and those things you have to be prepared for uh, when you have a DR like that. So always consider that from the data loss standpoint. You have to figure out how much data does your institution is willing to lose. Do you run backups once a day, once a week, once an hour, real time? All those have very much different costs associated with it. So that's something that needs to be at least discussed and for with your stakeholders to see if that's worth the price of investment. So that one's been an interesting one for us. Um, Knowing who to call, when to call, and what people are responsible for during your disaster is very important. Now, you can have a great disaster plan, but you may not be able to get a hold of the person that has to enact it. Another thing we found out through the years is not everybody's available during disasters. Some people, you know, had a couple of employees that lost their house. Well, guess what? The last thing on their mind is coming to work. They have to deal with their personal life first. And we understand that. But you also have to have a plan for if this person can't be here, who can fill that void. So that's another thing to consider. Um, you know, for hurricanes, obviously communication is spotty at best. For Hurricane Ida, my home internet did not work, so I had to actually come to campus to use internet. But that leaves a little interesting scenario when I'm at home. How do I know when I need to be on campus or when can I come on campus after disaster? It took me 3 tries for Hurricane Ida to get to campus because I couldn't physically get here because all the roads were damaged. But I kept trying because I knew I needed to be on campus because I'm on the one of the first lines of defense of employees that have to get back on campus. So I very rarely evacuate. So I constantly kept trying to get back to campus. Once I got on here, then we started getting our game plans. All right, we're going to be back on campus at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning for all those stakeholders here on site. So those kinds of communications are very important on how you deal with that when you can't actually talk to people. So you just got to have everybody has to know that plan and know when they have to be where. So that's been very, very interesting for us as well. So hopefully all these did. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, and I use the example all the time. If your house is on fire, would you text or email somebody? Or well, you text now, but you call somebody.
Right.
And in the absolute last thing we do on failover testing is we call 911. We want to make sure that in Chattanooga, the Hamilton County Sheriff is going to get the 911 call, and here in Auburn Hills, Oakland County Sheriff's going to respond. So,
Yeah.
911 is important.
And for an industry like you that's global, that's a very interesting point. We're here locally, and we have really no DR site, I guess, if you will, no remote campuses. Everything's here in the town of Thibodaux. So our calls go to the Foosh 911, which is our local peace app. So your environment, yeah, that's very interesting thought that I didn't think about. If you call 911 and you're in your DR environment in Chattanooga, who's come and see me?
Yeah. Yes, very true. So.
And with IT, everything always changes. So constantly updating your GR plan is very, very important, as well as testing, because you will eventually have it, and I guarantee it will not be an opportune time for you.
Yes. Yep. Yep. But I can't say sharing your communication plan with internal users and leadership is critical and key.
Yes, it is. Any closing remarks, Jeff?
No,
down.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity. If anybody ever has any questions, they're always free to reach out to me here at Volkswagen or through IAUG.
Yep, same here. I'm always here. We're both always here, Jeff. You can reach out to me as well at Nicholls State or see me at any of our events because it seems like Jeff and I are always around everywhere. So please come talk to us if you have any questions or any comments about us, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Jeff, for joining me today in this conversation, and we'll see all of you later. Have
Thanks
a
for
good
having me.
one.